Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for Arabella, the Abandoned Doll. Arabella is a Boros 1/3 legendary artifact creature toy. Whenever she attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. So, we just made some Boros token weenies. Why play Arabella? Because she is a very low costed commander. She costs 2, and if she dies, she costs 4. Like that's not bad at all. The ability triggers on attack and not damage, which is huge because we get to go all of our pre-combat stuff and all that fun stuff. It hits each opponent. That's big because even though we're attacking with a 1/3, at the very worst, we're attacking with a 1/3. Everyone takes 1 damage. We gain 1 life, and still the defending player would ideally take 1. So she's swinging for 4, basically, in a weird way. Life gain is a great offset to the crackback we will get by going full on in. When you attack with a token deck, you want to overwhelm your opponents with the amount of creatures you have. So the idea is that since we're gaining so much life anyways, it's okay if people attack us because we just incidentally gain it. Like, even if she didn't have the life gain effect and just had to deal damage, I'd still make this deck list. It's a fun deck. The entire deck is very low mana. Since everything is power 2 or less, most things with power 2 or less cost like less than 3 typically. So we can do a lot of stuff on our turn. We can cast a lot of spells on our turn, so we have a lot of draw to make that happen. And then there's a lot of fun with stacking triggers when we go to attack, because we can reorder a lot of our other attack triggers and our combat stuff to make sure that Arabella deals the most damage that she can do. Here's the game plan. We don't need her. We don't need her to win, right? Don't get me wrong. She's really, really good. The deck's built around her, but at the end of the day, we're still just Boros tokens. Like, we can win without Arabella. We don't need her, but she does definitely speed it up. So early game, we just want to play her in some small weenies, see if we can get some small attacks in, hit everyone for like 2 or 3. Mid game, just play more weenies and token generators to continue to make weenies. And then late game, swing with Arabella, mass drain. If we have like 15 creatures, everyone takes 15, we gain 15, and then that's just on her attacking. We still have all of our other tokens that are attacking and just the other miscellaneous burn effects that you will see that helps trick down our opponent's life. Channel and deck stuff. The deck's a bit pricey. It's about 510 at the making of the video. Take it with a grain of salt. Some cards from Duskmourn are going to go down, and also, like all of my other videos, you can just kind of cut a lot of the cards that are the big money value cards. Like, there's a handful of cards that are like $20, $30. Like, if you get rid of those two, replace them with like literally any other thing, the deck would be a lot cheaper. Get the cards you need from the link down below as always, and remember to like, comment, and especially subscribe to the channel. Going into Planeswalkers, we have just Elspeth's Sun's Champion. 6 mana is probably the highest our deck goes. But she's really good at when we get her down. She's either going to wipe the board to destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. That's none of our creatures, so it's just almost a board wipe for our opponents. Or we're going to +1 her to create 3 1/1 soldier creature tokens, which is nice because now when we attack with Arabella, or even at worst case scenario, Arabella and 3 guys, everyone takes 4 damage and we gain 4 life. The ult is good. It's good and bad in our deck because at the end of the day, we are tokens, so having our whole team be +2/+2 and flying is really good. But now all of our Arabella stuff doesn't work out. Like, all of our little guys matter stuff don't work out. So it's good and bad at the same time, but really we just want the nuke, we want the plus. Go into creatures, we have Adeline, who is a star 4, probably the biggest creature that's in our deck power-wise. The reason she's in here, her power is equal number of creatures we control, which is ideally a lot. But whenever we attack just anyone, for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player controls. So this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that stacking triggers is cool. Because let's say we go to combat, right? We have Adeline's trigger on the stack, and now we have Arabella's trigger on the stack. We can do Adeline's trigger first, so then we're making, let's say, 3 1/1 weenies, 3 1/1s that are attacking each opponent, and then Arabella will then trigger, and we'll drain the additional 3, assuming we're in a pot of 4, we have 3 opponents. so we can get even more guys, and then the drain will happen for bigger. A Gate Instigator is very good. Just whenever another creature enters the battlefield, deals 1 damage to each opponent, and then we can offspring them off to have a 1/1 token copy. So it's really, really good when we have 2 of them on the field for 4 mana. It's just whenever a creature enters, each opponent takes 2 damage. And then you look at cards like Adeline, and that is like a good example. It's like, even if you just have the 1 of them, each opponent takes 3 on enter, and then he drains everyone, then Adeline drains. So it's a lot of damage being done. Animpackle is essentially the same logic as Adeline. She's very good by herself, and just like whenever you attack with 1 or more non-gnomes, we have no gnomes in this deck. Put a 1/1 counter on Animpackle, then create X 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens where X that are tapped and attack over X is her power, or the number of counters on her. But she has a lot of words. Basically, it's nice because she doesn't have to attack. It's just whenever we attack. So say like, I don't know, turn 2 or turn 3, we play Animpackle. We already have Arabella. We attack with Arabella. Arabella is a toy. She's a non-gnome. We then make a 1/1 tapped and attacking, and then we drain. Where Animpackle will be a 2/3, and then the 1/1 gnome, and then the 1/3 Arabella. So we drain for an extra 3. So really, really good. And then as she gets bigger and bigger, eventually she won't count for Arabella, which is fine. But then she's making like 5 dudes that are attacking. Charismatic Conqueror is a great punishing piece for our opponent because it works out in 2 different ways. So I'll just read them. When an artifact or creature enters the battlefield untapped under an opponent's control, they may tap that permanent. If they don't, we make a 1/1 vampire creature token with lifelink. Let's talk about that, right? So the cool thing with Charismatic Conqueror is, as an aggro deck, we don't want our opponents to have blockers, right? That's just, we don't want our opponents to be able to block our trillion tokens. So they either have their creatures enter tapped, or we get a 1/1, which is great because that'll make Arabella even bigger, or they're entering tapped and we have less things to worry about when we swing out. Or even the flip side, their mana rocks now either enter tapped or we get a 1/1 for it, which is still really good. And he's a Vigilance 2/2 for 2, which is fantastic. Delny Streetwise Lookout is wonderful. Creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater, which is really good. And then if an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. That just straight up makes Arabella trigger twice. If we have 5 guys, or 5 total guys, Arabella now deals 10 damage and we gain 10 life, which is really good. Well, I guess she deals 5 damage twice and then we gain 5 life twice. Enduring Innocence is brand new lifelink. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control with power 2 or less enters, draw a card. It only triggers once each turn, which is nice because we have all of our guys are power 2 or less, most likely, at least all of our tokens are, and most of our non-tokens. So we're drawing. The tricky thing is we are a very low CMC deck, right? So when we're only like, when Charismatic Conqueror costs 2 mana, like we don't want to have it be like, okay, we have no cards in our hand. We always want to make sure that we're fueling over and over again and getting more and more cards. So cards like Enduring Innocence are just going to make sure that we keep drawing cards and we're doing more than one thing a turn. Which is good because we don't just want to play like a 2-mana 2/2. Ideally, we could play a 2-mana 2/2 and draw a card, and then play another 2-mana 2/2. And it's great because if it dies, it just comes back to the battlefield as an enchantment, a non-creature enchantment, which is nice. The enchantment will still have lifelink, which is kind of neat, but not the point. It's good overall. Esper Sentinel is just good card draw. It punishes our opponents, a good card draw. Giver of Runes is really good. Another target creature you control gains protection from a colorless or from the color of our choice until end of turn. This is really good if we're like going to attack someone, right? Let's say we're attacking a mono green player. We can just give Arabella mono green and she gets through no problem and does the big drain. Or we attack someone and then they say block Arabella, which doesn't really matter because we want her attack trigger to happen rather than her actual damage. Say they block with a green creature, or let's say they have like a 5-color deck and they're like, okay, I have like a red permanent and like a blue permanent, and like, I don't know, I'm going to block with like one of them. We can just, in response to that block, give Arabella pro that color so she won't take any damage and it'll live. Grand Abolisher is really good because we don't want our opponents doing stuff during our turns. Only we want to do stuff during our turns, which is really nice. Also use a 2/2, which is really good because ideally we want to go full out nuts on our turn, do as much as we possibly can. We don't want to be interrupted in that process. Imperial Recruiter enters the battlefield, search your deck for a creature card with power 2 or less, reveal it, and then put it into our hand. That's basically all of our creatures. Of course, Iroas is right there to prove me wrong. But it's basically all of our creatures with power 2 or less. So search your deck for, and he's also a 1/1, so he's going to count for Arabella, which is nice. But yeah, we just tutor up a creature. Iroas, God of Victory, indestructible. He has the whole God devotion thing. Our creatures have menace, so now our tokens are more annoying to block, and then prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. So now we really have no reason to not just swing out all the time, because Arabella is going to gain us a lot of life. Also, she can't really die in the process of this, and she has menace, and all of our other creatures have menace too, which is good. Legion Warboss is nice. He's just a 2/2, and then when he goes to combat, when we go to combat, we're going to make a 1/1 with haste that has to attack. So Arabella is always going to get like an extra dude for a trigger. And ideally that guy sticks around and we can get an extra token. Or we can attack with Legion Warboss and say we can make that 1/1 into a 2/2. Or we can even beef up Arabella and make her a 2/4 if we want. Either way, real good. Lauren of the Third Path is pretty funny. So 3 mana 2/1 Vigilance. When it enters, pop an artifact or an enchantment. And then, which is just good removal to deal with artifacts and enchantments we don't like. And then you and target opponent each draw a card. This is good just because we want to always be, again, drawing cards. We don't just want to play we just don't want to play Lauren and then pass. Like, we want to make sure that we're always fueling our hand with card draw. So, sure, an opponent draws a card, but we're also drawing cards, which is good. Loyal Apprentice, haste. At the beginning of your combat, if you control your commander, make a 1/1 Thopter, which is good. I like the idea of playing, say, Arabella turn 2, and then playing Loyal Apprentice, and then going to combat, and then making a 1/1, and now Arabella attacks with Loyal Apprentice and that Thopter. So that's 1 from Arabella, 2 from the Thopter, and then that's an extra 2, so 4 swinging damage, and then draining everyone for 3, and we gain 3. Really good. Mentor of the Meek, just short, sweet, simple. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under our control, we can pay mana, and if we do, draw a card. That's just great. We got extra mana, drawing extra cards. Molten Gatekeeper. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, deals 1 damage to each opponent. And it has Unearth, which is just kind of a little added bonus. So that's kind of another way, like, again, with a Gate Instigator, it's the same thing. A creature enters, deal 1 damage to each opponent. We're a token deck. We're making a lot of creatures. So even just like, it's nice to even think it's like, okay, we have Molten Gatekeeper on the field, and then we go to combat, and then we have our token generators that make tokens, and now everyone takes an extra damage, and then we go to attack, and then Arabella drains everyone from even more. It's good. Mondrak, just if we make a token, make that many those tokens +2. So we double up our tokens, and then we can pay 4 life and sacrifice 2 other artifacts or creatures to make Mondrak indestructible, which is good. Because we're a token deck, and if, say, someone wipes the board, or say we even wipe the board, we can just kill off 2 of our guys to make Mondrak indestructible for 1 mana. Mother of Runes is just better giver of runes. Mom is always really good. Just target creature gets protection from a color until end of turn. So we're either basically making Arabella. It's Annabelle, guys. We all know it's Annabelle. We're either making Arabella unblockable, or again, just protection. She's not dying from targeted removal or whatever. Myrel, Shield of Argive, is a 3/4. That doesn't work for Arabella at all. However, it has the Grand Abolisher text, which is really nice. And then whenever she attacks, create X soldiers, where X is the number of soldiers we control. We don't have a lot of soldiers. We do have like a couple things that make soldiers, but it's good for the Grand Abolisher, and then it's also good for the whole stacking triggers. We attack with Myrel, we make a 1/1, and then we do the drain. And it's also nice because obviously she's a soldier herself, so it's always going to trigger, and we just keep exponentially doubling up our soldiers when we attack. So it's a short clock when we have Annabelle on the field. Ocelot Pride is one of those pricey cards, but I honestly kind of think it's necessary for the deck. It's just too good. It's just too good. First Strike, Lifelink, Ascend, Ascend. At the beginning of your end step, if you've gained life this turn, create a 1/1 cat creature token. Then if you have the City's Blessing, for each token you control that enter the battlefield, create a token that's a copy of it. Like, you kidding me? That's so good. Arabella gains life, this thing gains life. We don't even have to attack with it, we gain life. It's just so nuts that we can just, like, double up our stuff. Old Tech Matter Weaver is great, just whenever you cast a creature. Either make a 1/1 gnome. Oh, I guess we do have a way to make gnomes. I guess Anim doesn't work super great. I'm just kidding. It's the only other like way you can make a gnome in all of Magic. I don't know. Or so we either make a 1/1 gnome, which is fine because we still want Arabella to trigger, or create a token that's a copy of target artifact token we control, which is a good way to help. I don't know. I guess booster up soldiers because Myrel makes colorless artifact soldiers. I don't know. Either way, the reason we're running it, whenever you cast a creature, he comes along with a buddy. Ogier Talk is good. It's probably, again, I think we peak out at like 6 CMC. If one or more creature tokens would enter under your control, we make 3 of those instead. And then if it dies, it turns into this land tapped. And then if we have attacked with 3 or more creatures, we can pay 3 mana and flip it over as a sorcery, which is good. So really, Ogier never really goes away. It's hard for Ogier to go away unless it gets exiled. Porphyros is good. Has the whole god stuff. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, he deals 2 damage to each opponent, which is very nice. Just incremental burn. Another funny trick that we can do is Arabella cares only on attack, only on the attack trigger, how many creatures you control with power 2 or less, right? But once that trigger happens and damage happens, we can use Porphyros to just beef up our guys if we want, to have them swing out for like 3 or whatever. Just like really extra, just an extra little combat trick. Make our tokens deal 1 more damage. Recruiter the Guard is basically the same as Imperial. Recruiter enters the battlefield, search your deck for a creature with toughness 2 or less, and then put it into our hand. So again, just search your deck for a creature, put it in our hand. Selfless Spirit, flying, sacrifice it. Creatures you control gain indestructible. He really is very selfless. There's always more to give. That's what I'm always saying. All jokes aside, one of the weaknesses of token decks, board wipes. There's not much we can do. If we build up a big board and then someone just destroys all creatures, it's going to be hard for us to rebuild. We can do it, but it's definitely not great. So Selfless Spirit taking 1 for the team is very, very good. Siege Gang Lieutenant has Lieutenant. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you have your commander, make 2 1/1 red goblins with haste, and then we can pay 2, sack a goblin, and deals 1 damage to any target. Which is nice because, I don't know, looking at everything through a vacuum, we have Arabella, we have Siege Gang Lieutenant on the field, we go to combat, we make 2 guys, we attack with Arabella. We have Arabella, the 2 goblins, and Siege Gang Lieutenant. So Arabella is hitting everyone for 4, we gain 4. Arabella is then also sneaking in for 1 damage plus the 2 extra damage from the hasty goblins. So that's a lot of damage, just with that guy. Sky Knight Vanguard, I think it's very short, sweet, to the point. When it attacks, just make a 1/1 white soldier creature token that's tapped and attacking. Just a good card overall, and it comes down really early. I guess everything comes down early, so you can't make that argument. But yeah, it's just a token maker for cheap, 2 mana, no big deal. And it's also tapped and attacking. We get the whole Arabella trigger. Soulfim is wonderful. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent, or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals double that damage to that player instead, or permanent instead. Which is great, because now if we attack with Arabella and we have 10 Weenies on the field, we're now dealing 20 damage to each opponent. Or let's say we have Porphyros and we have a creature enter the battlefield, each opponent's now taking 4 damage. It's our damage doubler. It is very cool. And I like the Phyrexian black and white like oil art. Some people don't like it. I think it's pretty neat. We have Soul Warden. Whenever another creature enters, we gain a life. Soul Warden is good really on the defense. We're not blocking with Soul Warden. It's just whenever another creature enters the battlefield. I don't know. I don't like that they just change it to enters. Just have it enter the battlefield makes sense. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield on anyone's board state, we gain 1 life, which is really, really good. And it also lets us just swing out constantly and not have to worry about dying on the crackback, because it doesn't matter if like we're taking like 10 damage when people are attacking us, just because we're gaining so much life anyways. Welcoming Vampire is wonderful, flying whenever 1 or more creatures with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under our control. Draw a card. Only happens once a turn, but still, it's really all we need with the handful of effects we have. Witch Enchanter just enters the battlefield. We can pop an artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. It is a 2/2, and it's also just a land on the backside. So depending when we have it, late or early game, it's a land. Cool. Late game, I don't know, it's a 2/2 that pops an artifact or enchantment. It's just good. It's just good. The final creature we have is Hamweir Garrison, and he has Meld. Whenever he attacks, put 2 1/1 red human creature tokens onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. That is so good. Handweir Battlements is its meld card, and honestly, Handweir Battlements is just a good card, but it's kind of like if you're running one, there's really no reason to not run the other. It taps for a colorless. You can pay a red and tap it to give target creature haste until end of turn, which is good because Arabella doesn't have haste, so if she does die and we replay her, we can give her haste. And then we can pay 5 mana, tap it. If we control both Handweir Battlements and Handweir Garrison, exile them and then meld them into Handweir the Rising Township, which is an Eldrazi Ooze. Trample haste. When it attacks, put 2 3/2 colorless Eldrazi creature tokens onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. Handweir the Writhing Township does not work with Arabella, but it hardly matters because that card is so good anyways. Handweir Garrison does work with Arabella, and the battlements work. If you have both of them, I would say it would be better to not meld them. However, how can you resist not melding them if you have both on the field? That's all I'm saying. Going into sorceries, Dusk, destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. That's not our creatures, which is great. Has the Aftermath, return all creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to our hand, which is basically all our creatures in the grave. We just put them all back on our hand. Martial Coup is good. Create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens, and then if X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. So it's a board wipe that leaves us with 5 1/1s, which is still pretty good. I guess, again, it's good because we have the 5 1/1s, and then we can play Arabella, and then we can kind of rebuild. It's if we have to wipe the board, and we got to take some damage from that, not damage, but some collateral for it. At least we get 5 guys out of it. Round 2, I like the idea when we have Mother of Runes or Giver of Runes or whatever on Arabella, and she already has protection for something, or maybe some other thing we see later in the video is Whisper Silk Cloak, but whatever. I guess Whisper Silk Cloak wouldn't count because that's Shroud. Doesn't matter, not there yet. Seize the Day, untap target creature. After this combat phase, after this main phase, there's an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase, and it has flashback. So the way I like this card is, let's say we give Arabella, I don't know, pro green, right? Because we attacked with a green, we're attacking a green player, or the only creatures that can block are green, right? Arabella attacks, we get the big drain, we play round 2 for 5 mana, we get the big drain again, and then we can flash it back to get the big drain for a potential third time in a turn. Song of Totenaz, create X 1/1 black rats. They can't be blocked, and creatures you control gain haste, which is really, really good because we basically are paying X to figure out how much damage our opponents are taking off Arabella, and we also get a bunch of hasty rats. Doesn't matter that they can't block, we're not really going to block with them anyways. And the final sorcery is the Battle of Bywater. Destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. Again, none of ours, maybe a couple of ours, but you know what I mean. Then create a food token for each creature you control. It's pretty good. It's a 3-mana nuke that doesn't really bother us. And then we can just gain a lot of life with the food tokens. Going into instance, we have a Chroma's Will. A Chroma's Will will ideally end the game as a token deck if we have Arabella. If we have Arabella, do both. Creatures you control gain Flying, Vigilance, Double Strike, Lifelink, Indestructible, and Pro all colors until end of turn. So they're unblockable, and they deal double damage, and they don't tap, and they gain us double life, which is really, really good, and in a token deck, that should end the game. Boros Charm is good. Also, I will say for a Chrome as well, it's also good on the defensive if we can't kill someone, or let's say we're waiting for someone to wipe the board. Giving things our permanents indestructible and creatures indestructible is big. That's also why we're running Boros Charm, is just because permanents you control gain indestructible. If someone board wipes, we lose everything. We do not want that to happen. Same kind of deal with Clever Concealment. Clever Concealment's a little bit different. It has Convoke, right? Which means Convoke is you can tap your creatures to help pay for the cost of it. So if we tap 4 creatures, or at least 4 white creatures, it'll pay for the mana. Any number of target non-land permanents you control phase out. So if someone wipes the board, we're out of there for a minute, which is fine because we don't want our guys to die. Dawn's Truce, same deal. It is just, we're going to have to gift a card. It just is what it is. It's also good if someone tries to just kill Arabella. We can give it hexproof. If the gift was promised, permanents you control also gain indestructible, which is good. Flawless Maneuver. So I said earlier we don't need Arabella to win, right? We don't, but the deck is built around her. So ideally we always have her, and we should always have her because she is 2 mana. If you control a commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. Creatures you control gain indestructible. Wonderful. Generous Gift is good. Just pop something we don't like. Its controller can have a 3/3 elephant, which is fine. There are some cards that token decks can't really deal with, like any kind of like prison effects, or like we can't attack someone due to like propaganda or whatever. We got to get rid of that. Kabira Takedown. It's a tap land on the other side. It deals damage equal number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker. It's just a good kill spell. Get rid of a planeswalker so we don't have to go to combat and attack it. Path to Exiles, get rid of a creature we don't like. They can have a land, basic land, tapped. That's fine. Either way, they're down a blocker or a big thing we can't interact with. Secure the Wastes is, I love it. It's like the ideal thing we do on an end step of just being like, okay, end of your turn, I'm going to make a ton of dudes. Here they are at instant speed. And then that's just more for Arabella to drain with later. Swords to Plowshares. Exile target creature, they gain life. We don't want them to gain life, but Arabella takes it down so fast it doesn't really matter that much. And ideally, like, we're getting rid of like a utility creature. Like if we're exiling, say, like I don't know, like an 8-power creature and they're gaining X life, probably we're not gonna have a good way to deal with that 8-power creature, I'll be honest. Teferi Protection to give a little we phase out, we're not even here anymore, we're not even a player. We do not want our board to go away. Same thing with Unbreakable Formation. It can be used but mostly defensively, but sometimes offensively. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end turn, and then if you cast a spell during your main phase, put a 1/1 counter on each of those creatures and they gain vigilance. Ideally, we're just doing it defensively. Just creatures get indestructible. We don't really want to put a counter on all of our guys because it takes away, which is funny because it's like, oh yeah, we actually don't want our guys to be that strong. Going into artifacts, we have Aetherflux Reservoir just because we can so easy gain a lot of life. Again, like when we're attacking and we're like draining everyone for 10 and we're gaining like 10 life on that, we're not too far away from getting 50, even if we're taking damage. Plus, since we're casting so many spells in a turn because we're trying to always fuel our draws and stuff, whenever you cast a spell, gain a life for each spell you cast, it's Storm Life. We can get to 50 pretty easy, and that's a pretty easy way to kill someone. Arcane Signet, it's just good mana. We don't really need a lot of ramp in this deck, but I always like to have a little bit just to be safe because although most of our creatures cost like 2 or 3, we still have like, you know, the big like Secure the Wastes that has like a big X cost. We want to make sure we still have a good amount of mana. Arcane Signet's fine. Idol of Oblivion is good because we can draw a card, but we can only draw a card if a token entered the battlefield this turn. But most likely we are always generating tokens on our turn, so we should always be drawing an extra card a turn. And then I doubt we'll ever do it, but we can always make like a quick 10/10 for 8 mana. We're probably not doing that. We're really just drawing a card every turn. We have Lightning Greaves, tossed it on Arabella. She has Shroud and Haste. That's like 2 things we want. Skull Clamp to kill one of our tokens for 1 mana and draw 2 cards, which is also wonderful. Soul Ring is Soul Ring. I don't really care for this art too much. I mean, it's alright. I like the other ones. I like the background. I just don't like the ring itself. Swiftfoot Boots. Give Arabella Hexproof and Haste. Now that's something that is good, because again, we want her to attack all the time, and we don't want her to die at all. Talisman of Conviction, just good ramp, and then Whisper Silk Cloak is to give her unblockable and Shroud, just so we don't have to worry about, like, creature or people killing her, and then we don't have to worry about, like, dealing with, like, protection stuff, or, like, making sure that she can attack. She can just attack all the time now, because she has unblockable. Going into enchantments, we have Anointed Procession. If we would make a token, make twice that many tokens, it's a token doubler. That's really it. Assemble the Players is like built for this deck. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. Once each turn, you may cast a creature spell with power 2 or less from the top card of your library. We got like 30-something creatures in this deck, and they're almost all power 2 or less. So it's almost, you can play the top card of your deck. Impact Tremors is really good. Whenever a creature enters a battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. It is a baby Porphyros, but still really, really good. Prosperous Partnership, I really like the idea of when it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens, and then we can tap 3 untapped creatures we control to create a treasure. Here's how I think of this. A lot of the tokens that we make aren't going to have haste, right? So it's really nice to be able to like, okay, well, we made like a lot of guys or whatever, and we're going to go to someone's end step, like before it's our turn, and we're going to tap down our entire board and make a handful of treasure. Like, I do like that. Rabble Rousing is a good example of Prosperous Partnership, and I'll talk about that in a second. Hideaway 5 for 5. Hideaway 5 is look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Exile one of them face down under Rabble Rousing, and then when we meet the condition, which is having 10 or more creatures, we can play without paying its mana cost. But whenever you attack with one or more creatures, create that many 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. So it's really nice just to swing out. Say we swing with like 10 guys, Rabble Rousing now makes 10 untapped guys, which is good, and then we'll also get the free hideaway card, which is great. But it's these kind of effects like Rabble Rousing that just makes guys without haste that are good there. They're for good blockers, but Prosperous Partnership can now tap down all of those tokens that we make just to make a treasure, get more mana. Going into lands, I didn't go crazy on the lands because there's really not a ton of things you can go crazy on the lands with. I put Arena of Glory. We have a lot of basics. It's going to enter the battlefield tapped unless we control Mountain. Taps for a red, or we can pay a red, tap it, and exert it, which means it's not going to untap during our next untap step, to add red, and then that if that mana is spent on a creature, it gains haste until end of turn. So the way this is cool is we can use one of those red manas on Arabella to give Arabella haste, or we're just getting, you know, red. Not really ramp or anything, but it's nice that the way Arena of Glory is cool is you can do it on 2 separate creatures, right? I can use like one of that red and some mana to cast Arabella, and I can use that other red mana and whatever other mana to then cast 2 creatures that now have haste. Castle Embereth is the same kind of thing I said earlier about Porphyros, is once we do all of the attack triggers and all that, once people go to like the blockers or damage, we can now get up our whole board +1/+0, because now we don't care if they're like power 3 or greater, or rather we don't care that they're smaller than 2. Clifftopper Troops almost always going to enter untapped. Command Towers, just whatever, any color we need. Escape Tunnel is really neat in this deck, so we can search our deck for a basic land and put it on the battlefield tapped. So at worst it's Evolving Wilds, or we can tap it and sacrifice it to effectively make Arabella unblockable this turn, which is also really cool. Fountain Port is real neat. It can do a lot. Taps for a colorless, fine. Pay 2, sacrifice a token, draw a card. That's really good. Pay 3 and a life, make a 1/1 blue fish, and this pay 4 mana, make a treasure. So these are the kind of stuffs where I'm thinking like at the end of someone's turn, like before our turn starts, we can just do this real quick, get like little free added benefit from it, draw a card, make a dude, make a treasure, or whatever. Just for a little like extra end step value. Worst case, it's just a land. Sacred Foundry, because it enters untapped. Spectator Seeding should also enter untapped. Actually, Spectator Seeding is almost always enter untapped because we are pretty much killing everyone at the same time. And then we have Sundown Pass, which should almost always enter untapped, ideally, because we'll always have 2 or more lands. And then going into our basics, we do have 11 mountains and 13 plains. You can change these however you'd like, but as a Boros, like 2-color deck, we don't really need anything too crazy. You can add any number of duels or mana fixing or whatever, but the deck doesn't really need it. But that's all I got. Thank you guys for watching. Tell me what you think of the deck. Get the cards you need from that link down below. And then as always, like, comment, and especially subscribe to the channel. And I will see you guys next time.